I picked up JoyFULL because it is a vegan cookbook. I hadn't been familiar with Rhadi Devlukia-Shetty, the author, but I saw that it was plant-based recipes and brought it home from the library. I learned that this is also an Ayurvedic cookbook, and the author shares her skincare routines, her meditations, and it talks about Ayurvedic practices. And so some of those things I definitely take with a grain of salt. So, for example, there's a section where she talks about hydrating. It's called Hydrate, Hydrate, Hydrate. And she writes, drinking water with meals dilutes the acid that is breaking down your food, and so it takes longer to digest it. And there is no scientific evidence to support this, so I disregarded that. She also advises people to avoid cold drinks and iced beverages because she says it dampens the fires of digestion. And again, my personal preference is not to drink cold beverages, but it's not because of the fires of digestion. While we're in the topic of beverages, there's one that she calls Unwind, Cherry and Rose. And in the recipe, which is for a single beverage, she calls for a half tablespoon of ground cardamom. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with cardamom, if they just went ahead with that recipe, I think they would find it way, way too strong. Her other recipes for beverages that include cardamom, there's a 1/4 teaspoon, which seems like about the right amount to me, so I'm sure there's an error in that recipe. She also has something that she calls a detox tea, and as far as I'm concerned, detox is another scientifically unproven idea. So I disregard anything that says detox. I mean, it still might be a good tea, but not for a detox purpose. So she has lots of ideas, like toast with various toppings, and the photographs are really appealing, as you can see. I'm covering up the recipes so I don't infringe on copyright, if you're wondering why I've got white pages here. There's a recipe for a vegan cream cheese if you don't want to buy the kind that's got a lot of ultra-processed ingredients in it. She does include tomatoes in her recipes. So this is something about Ayurvedic principles, and that is no onions, no garlic, and no nightshades. And tomatoes are a nightshade. But as she says in the introduction, she really loves tomatoes, and so she just tries to not eat them so often. But I did count, and out of the 125 recipes, 30 of them include tomatoes. And the reason I'm paying attention is because I am sensitive to tomatoes, and so that's one aspect of Ayurvedic cooking that I really appreciate, is avoiding tomatoes. She does have a nightshade-free tomato sauce recipe that I'm planning to try, and that one is done with cooked carrots and beets and various other ingredients, but I haven't tried that one yet. I have tried a number of these recipes. Some of them are more work than I would care to do often. Some of them, when I come to them, I'll tell you about them. But speaking of more work, this spiced avocado toast, it requires 6 different spices that you heat in oil and then spread in your avocado toast. So it is a fair bit of trouble. She does advise people that you can save time in the morning by making your cream cheese the day before and making hummus the day before. This one with the hummus, olives, and sun-dried tomatoes. And this other toast has got nut butter and sliced seasonal fruit on it. So those are some of the examples of breakfast. The names that she has for her recipes interested me. So for example, this one is called smashed chipotle beans and avocado on quesadillas. And I actually don't see any difference between refried beans and her recipe for smashed chipotle beans. So I guess smashed chipotle beans sounds better. She does talk about how vegetarians might have trouble giving up eggs and dairy and comfort foods like French toast. So there's a recipe in here for a French toast casserole. That is one that I want to try that I haven't yet. Her header notes are quite interesting. So in this one, which is a spicy Indian pasta, she has a story about how she and her cousin used to have midnight feasts and use Indian spices in their pasta dishes that they cooked up. And this one, she said, was inspired by Chinese takeout food, and it's called sticky hoisin noodles. I've made it twice already. It's an excellent recipe. I really like it. I also tried her split mung dal recipe, and I liked it very much. Two of the dishes that are photographed here don't have what recipe they are. And this one in particular, it looks like paneer with spinach. But what she has instead of paneer is what she calls magic protein paneer. And it's something that I would call Burmese tofu. You cook up besan or chickpea flour with water and then let it cool and cut it into chunks. And according to the author, you can't even tell the difference when you put it into your dish. People think it's paneer. Now these burgers have a replacement for caramelized onions, and that is caramelized cabbage. And this is another thing that she says, people can't tell that it's not onions. This is a tabbouleh that is made with crumbled cauliflower instead of grain. I think calling it tabbouleh is a bit of a stretch, not just because it's got cauliflower instead of grain, but there's a really small proportion of parsley compared to a usual tabbouleh recipe, and she's put dried cranberries in it, and the vinaigrette, it has got Dijon mustard in it, so it doesn't seem very tabbouleh-like to me. I think she could have thought of another name for this one. And the coconut green beans, I recognize this recipe as one from another cookbook that I have, Madhur Jaffrey's World of the East Vegetarian Cooking. Madhur Jaffrey calls it coconut sesame green beans. In this cookbook, the sesame seed is optional. Oh, here's the zucchini baba ganoush. So instead of using eggplant, which is a nightshade, this is a replacement made with zucchini, which is kind of interesting. But there are 3 recipes in here that do use eggplant. So speaking of nightshades, I did try this recipe. It's sweet potatoes roasted and then served with a pesto made with black Tuscan kale. You blanch the kale first, cook it a bit before blending it up with parsley, and she uses nutritional yeast instead of Parmesan and asafoetida instead of garlic. Actually, throughout this book, asafoetida is the spice that's used to give that sort of oniony, garlicky sort of flavor. I had to dig it out from way in the back of my spice cupboard. And I was happy to see a recipe for sunchokes. I had sunchokes at the Acorn restaurant in Vancouver earlier this month. So I tried this out and it worked out really well. There's a golden aioli to go with it. And the recipe is golden because the vegan mayonnaise has got Dijon and turmeric added to it. Very tasty dish. She has a muhammara recipe. Muhammara is a Syrian dish. Actually, it's made in lots of different places in the Middle East, but it is made with red peppers and walnuts that are blended. And I learned from Danny Ramadan, the Syrian-Canadian author, that it's very important to make it spicy. He wrote that in the book, The Anti-Racist Kitchen, which I talked about in a previous video. Anyway, in the headnotes for this recipe, the author writes, "It's smoky, it's sweet, it's tangy, it's nutty, it's spicy, a little bit like me. But when I looked through the recipe, there was nothing to make it spicy. There's only a little bit of chili oil drizzled on top. That's optional, but there's no hot pepper spicy ingredient at all. So yeah, I don't think Danny Ramadan would approve of this muhammara recipe. This beet carrot halva. This dessert looks so beautiful. This is a good example of the lovely photography in this book. This is another one that I'd like to try. I did try this one. It's called Dee Dee's Pear and Chocolate Crumble. I made it in one dish instead of individual ramekins, and it's scrumptious. I will definitely make it again. And there's one more dessert to show you. A chocolate mud pie that's done with silken tofu, and it's got coconut cream and cashew butter. Yeah, it sounds very good. Oh, and of course, chocolate. There's lots of chocolate in it. So overall, I got a lot out of this cookbook, even though there were some parts I decided to disregard, and I would recommend it to anybody looking for a vegan cookbook. Thanks for watching.